you have people saying that we don't exist. Why do people have a problem with me saying Taino Daka or Daka Taino? So why? Because there's implications to that. There's implications to what started 500 years ago, 520 years ago, to what's going on today and around the world.
Happy Columbus Day. Thank you for being here.
I'm Christopher Columbus, who sailed the ocean sea in order to discover a new world. After Columbus, a new migration began from Europe to America. So therefore, it is an international acknowledgement also that it is an important event. Acuérdese que él vino en Sudamérica, en Central América. Viva Puerto Rico, viva Colombia, viva Cuba y otros países. Christopher Columbus may be in bad waters lately in America, but in fact he did discover America from the European point of view.
Daka Mukaro, Oriken Taino Daka. Greetings, relatives. Bienvenidos a todos. Familia. Very happy to see everybody here today. I wanted to introduce you first in our native language, our Taino language. Why are we standing here on this spot in New York City today? Why? Because we choose to remember. Waharoko, some people say it like that. We remember what happened in 1492. We remember what happened, the starting of a cycle that hasn't changed. Remember, relatives, Columbus is not a day. It's a symbol, not even of man, but of genocide. That's what we're doing here today, to remind people what that's about.
Well, this drum is a log drum, and in the Taino language, it's called a mayawakan. And this is quite a small one. Some of them can be quite large. And this would be sort of like one of the main instruments at a Taino gathering. I don't see being Taino as pulling something off. It's just who we are. The only people who have a problem with our identity is scholars who hang on to a colonial narrative.
Yes, I would say that the pre-Columbian Taino population became extinct by the end of the 16th century. By 1600, you can't really say that there were any pure-blooded Tainos left. Any survival involved a mixture with the African population or a mixture with the European population or some combination of those two by the early 17th century. So pure-blooded Tainos, no such thing, they're extinct. Taino identity, I would say, is motivated by an attempt to avoid identification with the African and African heritage, which is seen as a negative in U.S. society, and also in Puerto Rican society. and in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean in general. And it's also, I would say, an attempt to avoid identification with Europeans, especially the Spaniards, because the Spaniards are seen, rightly so historically, as colonizers, as oppressors, as individuals who employed slave labor, and so on.
I became aware of my native heritage as a young boy. Both my parents were born on the island of Boriquén, which we know today as Puerto Rico. My mother was the first one to impart that knowledge to me. And she was the first one who used the word Taino.
You know, going over their history books and things like that, I'm saying, gee, you know, they really don't know who they are, you know. There's nothing here about, you know, their people. And I didn't even know who their people was, except all my uncles in Puerto Rico. So I went to the library and I found these books on the Taino. They were like, you know, so I thought that was really interesting. I said, wow, we have Indians in our family. So I had bought them back for him so that he could look into it. And then I went to my mother and I said, Ma, do you know about the Tainos? Because she was living with me at the time. But she said that my grandfather was part Taino. In fact, we went to Niagara Falls and the first thing he wanted was a spear and an Indian head thing. And that was before he, you know, he knew anything. And I have pictures of him with that on. Yeah, yeah. I guess it's in the blood, you know. Eventually it comes out somehow.
That starting of Christopher Columbus's journey over and the impact it had on indigenous peoples in the Caribbean and in the Taino people in particular, because we were the first ones that were encountered in 1492. Since that time, we've lost lands, language, and many of our people have lost pride in who they are. So much so that within families, our people are told, yes, we are native, we are Tainos, but don't talk about it. You know, don't bring attention to that to yourself. So you have people going on for generations with that kind of mindset, you know? And then that allows a world to be built around people that continuously promotes one perspective of this historical encounter. What's at stake here is respect for human rights and human dignity. I think that's something that hasn't been really focused on. Many of us are one generation out of a rural environment, you know, meaning that our families lived in impoverished conditions. And we remember that. You know, not all of us were from families who have a long history of college, etc. And I don't think those voices have ever really been taken into account in the historical record. And as a result of that, you have people saying that we don't exist.
In spite of the fact that Christopher Columbus came to our lands and so forth, later on, as time went by, we embraced the Spaniards. And we worked with them. Sort of like, you know what? We'll work with you to help it make it better. And this is after they enslaved us. So that's a lesson to be taught. How can we teach it to you if you won't allow us? How can we help you if you keep on trying to crush us? I mean, it's not about us. It's about all of mankind. It's all humanity. And I think that as Native people, we have that message, and I don't think we're the only ones that have it.
How many people have walked up to all of us? All of us. Oh, but they're dead. The history books say they're dead. The history books say this Christopher Columbus was this wonderful man who came over here and saved us. And oh my goodness, he was a dog. He was a crook, he was a rapist, and he was a thief. So were his men.
In order for us to be able to show everybody else that we're still here and that we do exist, we have to come across to our own people, because unfortunately a lot of them are ignorant to what's, to their heritage. And it's hard to be us. I learned it the hard way from our own people. And it would be nice that our own people, when they see that we have the strength to come out and to let everybody know, listen, we're still here. We can get together. There's this brotherhood that we can start this nation all over again, and we can help each other out. Instead of mocking us or, thinking, oh, esa loca, or, those are things that they don't exist or whatever. They should try to go back and read and look and learn and listen and try to get into that, bring into like a unity. But it has to start first from our own people.
What they took away from us, we are taking back and giving back. It's giving back to our kids so that they don't have to grow up with this wondering like many of us did. Well, we have Spanish names, but my grandmother was saying that we were Indians, or que somos indios, so, but what do we have that reflects that besides, ourselves, maybe what we have physically?
Are they a bunch of racists? No, I wouldn't say they're a bunch of racists. They're racialists, meaning that they accept this whole idea or notion or concept that you can subdivide the human species into these crude categories called races. And they are crude categories: European, white people, and so-called black people. And when it comes to the Native American population, even today, I would say academics have said that just about all of the indigenous populations that we have today are mixed to some degree. I think the main issue has to do with historical tradition. In the case of the Neo-Tainos, there has been no official recognition by governments, or for that matter, academics or historians or what have you, that there is a historical tradition saying that, oh, within the Puerto Rican population, oh, within the Dominican population, you have this group that can be identified as indigenous, whether they're pure or mixed or what have you. Well, I would ask a Neo-Taino, why isn't Puerto Rican, Dominican, or Cuban identity good enough? Why privilege a Taino identity? Where does that get you? How do you get access to jobs, housing, other types of benefits? How do you accomplish or achieve upward economic and social mobility by identifying as Taino?
There's an ideology that says that Puerto Ricans and even Dominicans and Cubans, Caribbean peoples, even Jamaica has a slogan, out of many come one. And it's a construct of national identity. For us in Puerto Rico, in Boriquen, they say that we're the result of the Taino, the Spaniard, and the African. I see it this way. If you look at a Puerto Riqueño or Boricua, and you remove the Taino element out, you don't have the same Puerto Riqueño, you don't have the same Boricua. However, if you remove the Spanish element or the African element, we are still indigenous. We're still Taino.
Starting in the 1980s and 1990s, a number of so-called tribal groups emerged, mostly based on what I've seen and what others have seen in the mainland areas, not on the islands, and up here in the Northeast. Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, so that you have, you have various so-called tribes.
We're here in the Youngstown area of Ohio, in a beautiful Woodworth Park, and we are celebrating the summer solstice. I'm a clinical manager of an addictions clinic. I have my PhD. I'm a professor also of social work at Youngstown State University. I'm a professional woman, and I am very proud of who I am. I've had to teach some of my colleagues, some of my Native brothers and sisters, that we were the first people that Columbus encountered. We were the first people. And when we consider that we have been here since time immemorial, that we have even traded as far north as the state of Virginia, the fact that we had traversed every part of this country, the fact that we had traversed with the other native peoples of North America, says that we have been very, very productive. We have made a lot of contributions, and we have influenced other native groups.
Wakar is going to be represented by a man holding in the effigy of a shark. The shark is the trickster spirit in Taino tradition, and it represents Wakar. And there will be a battle between the shark spirit, Wakar, and Yokahu, the spirit of hope, the spirit of life, the spirit of thriving. And at the end, at the culmination of that, you're gonna have to shoot it with a bow and arrow.
Well, these feathers have a story. The red is for the blood we spilled when the black Columbus came to us. The white is for the white that shined upon our innocence on the sun, and the sun who shined upon our innocence. And these are the colors that we are now alive again. And this is my dancing stick.
A way of thinking that came over from one side of the world has affected so many people 500 years later. And we could look at the way the people who came over looked at the world and the natural environment, the way they looked at other peoples, the discrimination, because quote unquote a religion was different, or they honored the world around them in a different way. When you start to put all those connections together, you start to see why the world is in the shape that it's in today. Because there's a certain mindset that was put forth. And there was no opportunity for that sharing and learning, right? There was a real missed opportunity on the part of the colonizers, because they wanted to shape the people on this side of the world, on this side of the hemisphere, into what they knew and what they understood and what they expected people to be. You see, for them, we shouldn't have even been here on this side of the world, because their religious doctrine told them that that side of the world was the only side of the world, that they were their only people. So we shouldn't have even been here. And I think that added to some of the aggression against our people.
Urabansesh is my Taino name. And in terms of how everything came about, or my Indianness, it started when it started prior to that, but at the age of 8, I was asked to come into the room, and I was told, you are not Latin, you are not Hispanic, you are not Spanish. You are an Indian, you're an Arawak Taino, and don't you ever forget it. And I never did. And I started going to my first powwows actually in Manhattan. They were kind of hidden at the age of 9. And I've been on the powwow trail for 35 years, representing Taino culture. And I do find pockets in South Carolina, North Carolina. No matter what state I go to, there are certain settlements, communities that still adhere to the Taino ways and identify themselves as Taino, and people who try to teach others about Taino history and what we are today. I sometimes ask them if they're aware of Wounded Knee in the 70s. Were they there? Did they realize that there were Tainos there being called names like Spick Indian or Prairie Niggers?
We're calling all dancers, all you dancers, come on in. Intertribal time for everybody.
Which is why many of our people also resonate to other native peoples, you know, whether they're in the United States or elsewhere, is because we understand that, we came from that, we understand what they're talking about. Because we are indigenous peoples, we come from that. You know, we cannot help colonization.
The other thing is, I'd like to know how many of these people are even Indians to begin with, because I've looked at them, and I have to tell you something, they don't look like Indians to me. And I've told a couple of them who came into my office, I said, I believe I have more Indian blood in my veins than you have, and I have none. And they laugh. They think it's a joke.
The whole issue of Taino survival and Taino identity is a diversion from other issues that I think Puerto Ricans and other Caribbean Latinos should be focusing on. Issues of housing, access to jobs, the current economic climate overall, you know, what some of us would think are the really important issues in one's life. I really understand what the almost obsession is with this whole issue of Taino identity.
Una fuente contundente es la de Antonio Herrera en 1601, que dice que todos los indios de Puerto Rico viven en las sierras de San Germán, donde ahí tienen los conucos, las fincas. Porque yo lo que hice también es examinar los textos de las escuelas públicas. ¿Qué le enseñan a los muchachos? Y para mi sorpresa, hasta 1948, inclusive después de la invasión norteamericana, los indios estaban vivos hasta el siglo XVIII, XIX. Entonces, ¿qué pasó? Es la gran interrogante, porque coincide con la aparición del Estado Libre Asociado. En el 52 hay un cambio en la escuela y el indio desaparece. Lo desaparecen de los libros y la versión es que fueron exterminados.
This whole notion of privileging Taino identity, the whole racial aspect of it, trying to subdivide the Caribbean Latino populations or fragment it into these simplistic categories that really don't have much scientific validity. The Neo-Tainos latched on to the Martinez Cruzado study of the mtDNA, the mitochondrial DNA, and blew that all out of proportion to its significance.
Yo soy Juan Carlos Martínez Cruzado, yo soy catedrático de biología del recinto universitario de Mayagüez de la Universidad de Puerto Rico. Y lo que hemos encontrado aquí es que el 61% de los puertorriqueños tienen un ADN mitocondrial de origen indígena, que por sus características podemos demostrar que viene de una sola tribu, en la gran mayoría, como el 84 o inclusive posiblemente el 88% de él viene de una sola tribu, que debe ser definitivamente la tribu taína, oriunda de Puerto Rico y de Boriquén.
One of the biggest violations of our human rights that we see going on today is our inability to deal with the ancestral remains of our people. If an island like Boriquén or Puerto Rico has laws that deal with grave sites and cemeteries, why aren't the Taino ancestral sites, the grave sites of our ancestors, covered under those laws if we're all equal under the law? This shows that there is discrimination against indigenous peoples at the highest level. But because they're Indian bones, right, nobody seems to care. But if we're all connected somehow to this tripartite heritage, then we should all care. We don't see the African bones underneath these glass cases, and we don't see the bones of Ponce de Leon underneath the glass case. So why is it that our ancestors are underneath those glass cases? So when our children go to the museums, that sets up a kind of trauma. You can't tell me that it's for science. In those old censuses that the Spaniards were conducting, we know that, one, they were focusing on the towns or the people around the towns, the settled towns. The other side of that is that, you know, why would these people in the mountains participate in that anyway? You know, even if they were given the opportunity. So we have to be careful with census data because it's never really accurate, and we see that even today. However, the census and that process is also an opportunity for Taino people today. The same way they wrote us out of history, we're now going to write ourselves back in.
Those who identified as Taino, especially in Puerto Rico, were claiming that politics was not part of this at all. But then 3 years ago or so, there was the takeover of the ceremonial, the archaeological site, the ceremonial center at Caguanas. And some of them then articulated a political position that suggested that they might make some land claims. And some of the cynics, of course, say that, oh, this all has to do with casinos and that sort of thing.
It's an international issue. It's an international issue that all indigenous people are struggling with because of the underlying political issues. Land, water, fishing, hunting. Our sacred sites are being used as tourism. Okay, so there's all this interest, this underlying, you know, that no one ever really thinks about, but is there, and that's the resistance. Because once we have full sovereignty, right, what does that mean, full sovereignty? We decide who we are, who's our people, and we have a right to protect, manage, and caretake, because that's our original instructions, you know?
There's a certain level of ownership around the concept of Taino, right? And you hear this all the time in discourse. You hear them say, nuestros indios, our Indians. Like, what do you mean, our Indians? Like, the Indians are the possession of the country? Nuestros indios, our Indians? Like, you got to think about that. You know, you have to think about what are you saying with that? See, when I say that, I say our ancestors, right? I'm not owning them in a possessive way. They're my relations, right? But they're not our Indians. You know, that's like we won them, right? In the conquest, we won them. They're our Indians. So this is our national patrimony. Those bones are ours. Those artifacts are ours. But you see, that's the consciousness that they have. We had been lobbying the museum in Jayuya in Cedetra, el Museo del CEMI, which is a big, large replica of a ceremonial icon that as Taino people we call CEMI. And in that CEMI museum, there was one of our ancestors underneath a glass case there. So for years we were lobbying locally and folks from the diaspora to reinter those bones. So at the end of a long period of lobbying, there was finally a breakthrough with the management at the museum. And we came to an agreement that the bones would be reinterred, but they couldn't be taken off the property. So right now, that ancestor who is identified as a Taino woman, for us, she's our great-great-great-grandmother, right? Or our sister or our auntie, our titi, right? But we were able to ceremoniously take those remains from that dear sister, put her in the ground similarly to the way our ancestors would do that with pottery, with special things that you would see. I went to Jayuya to support the Peace and Dignity Run Boriken 2010. That run is connected to another run called the Peace and Dignity Journeys. Why they do the Peace and Dignity Journeys is that there's an ancient prophecy that says when the eagle of the north meets with the condor of the south, then it'll be a new time for indigenous peoples. It'll be a new time for them to come together, learn from each other, and start moving into a new phase for the peoples.
In these mountain towns, the use of Taino symbolism is very prevalent. Everybody's very proud of the symbolism, right? They're very proud of the symbolism, but as long as it stays in the past, you see? When the symbolism comes to the present, that's when people have a problem with it, right? So for them, los Tainos eran, or the Tainos were, but for us, the Tainos are. You see, by leaving the Taino in the past, the local governments, the municipalities are in favor of that because it promotes tourism, economic growth in the communities, you see? But once we start talking about, for example, repatriation of ancestral remains or co-management of sacred sites, then that's where the issue comes in, right? That's when they say, hold it, hold it, hold it. You know, the Tainos were. They would say, no, the Tainos are.
Previously, they started the first Peace and Dignity Journey in 1992 as a response to the Columbus 500-year anniversary celebrations. And it was a way to bring attention to the situations of indigenous peoples throughout the hemisphere. Up until this time, the Caribbean hasn't really been included officially. So we really wanted to connect the Caribbean islands to this continental run because 1492, everything started, this whole cycle that we're experiencing and as indigenous peoples, this 500-year cycle starts in the Caribbean. So there was a need for us to make a statement to say, hey, we are still here, we have sacred sites, we have a legacy from our ancestors that needs to be a part of the eagle and condor prophecy. And some of our elders say that it's the hawk or the guaraguao, as we say in the Taino language, that is kind of the mediator for that eagle and the condor. So this was the idea of bringing the Peace and Dignity Run to Boriken to Puerto Rico, because these prophecies are not going to be fulfilled unless the Caribbean is part of the fold, because that's where it happened.
But in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, I don't see what the issue is. I don't know of any actual discrimination that these people have to deal with in terms of access to jobs or housing or anything like that. People might make fun of them on the island in particular if they, identify as Taino, because most people in Puerto Rico and in Cuban Dominican Republic know a little something about their history.
I'm a proud Tlingit woman, and I'm fully immersed in Taino culture and Taino ways at the same time. My husband is my other half, where we are one, and everything that he experiences and goes through, I fully feel the effects of it all. What it comes down to is that each individual person has a foundation, and that foundation is your family. And your family always comes first, no matter what. So I feel blessed and honored to be able to walk this journey in that way, and being exposed and living Tlingit culture and Taino culture.
Because this movement can be very thankless at times, can be very hard on your family. I mean, you become the subject of conversation in a way that's not positive. But again, no matter how many times I thought just to leave this and to walk away, just something happens to say, how could I do this? How could I look my children in the face and say that I just walked away from speaking up for their rights and giving them an identity and trying to protect this earth.
So you're saying thank you to Mother Earth, Bo Matum Matabe. You're saying that she's very generous. You're saying thank you to her. So you say Bo Matum Matabe.
Bo Matum Matabe.
Girls, how do you say I am Taino?
Taino Daka. Taino Daka.
I started out just asking what I could do to help. And I guess unfortunately, people took me up on that offer and they asked me to help. And I didn't know anything about the United Nations or what was happening there. I was like, well, I'm just kind of like an artist, a musician, and just trying to figure things out for myself. I'm considering it a journey of service.
Takahi Waitiao Daka Mukaro Boriken Taino Daka. Greetings, relatives. My name is Roberto Barreiro, and I'm going to be your MC for the evening. I just wanted to get your attention and start things off in that way with our conch shell or guamo, we usually use in our meetings to get people's attention. And I want to thank you all for being here for this opening reception for this session of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. I want to thank the local Indigenous community for all their work and supporting this forum. I want to thank all of our elders who are here, all the ones who came before us. So we want to start this off in a good way. And of course, this is a United Nations meeting session. So we start off with a welcome from the United Nations system.
There was this recent event at the United Nations. It was the opening of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. This is a recently created advisory body within the UN system. It's the first time that a body such as this has had this kind of high-level institutionalization within that structure, within the UN structure. And that was a result of over many years, from actively from 1977, but even before that, even before the UN was the UN, indigenous peoples were going to then the League of Nations. So we have the opportunity now to speak up in a different way. And if we can get restitution or understanding at the local level, and we've exhausted those means, in our view, then there's no other place to go but to the international system to seek support. Because if we're not being told the correct history, if we're not being allowed to affirm an identity while other people are allowed to affirm identities, then that's an injustice because it affects us again, generation after generation.
And I would like first to recognize Mr. Roberto Mucaro Barreiro, who will speak on behalf of the International Indian Treaty Council. You have the floor, sir.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Distinguished chiefs, clan mothers, the two-row paddlers. I just want to take the time to also congratulate you as well as the Dakota Unity Riders who are also here. I want to take an opportunity to thank them as well. It's really an honor to be here at such a moment in our collective history, and it's equally an honor to see us writing our own history instead of having our history fed to us in the ways that it has been in the past. So it's again, I commend you all on your great effort and what you've done today and what you've brought to this building today. Again, applause for you all. Mr. Chair, I'm taking the floor on behalf of the International Indian Treaty Council, but I'm also the current president of the United Confederation of Taino People, which is an ITC Treaty Council affiliate. And my affiliation is important to note as Taino people, the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean, need to be also recognized as the first indigenous peoples in this hemisphere to enter into an international treaty with Europeans. The historic event that I'm mentioning is the Barreiro Treaty of 1533, which was entered into by our great cacique, our chief, Guarocuya, or Enriquillo, or Henry, with a representative of the Spanish crown. And I wanted to also take this opportunity to thank First Nations of Canada, in particular, for recognizing this fact in a resolution they adopted during a meeting of the Assembly of First Nations in the National Treaty Conference held in Yellowknife, Canada, in the Northwest Territories in 1998. So I want to take that opportunity to thank AFN and all the First Nations of Canada for recognizing that Taino treaty.
Together, we work on issues that are affecting the Taino people in the Caribbean, but also other indigenous peoples throughout Turtle Island and throughout the world. Issues like protecting sacred sites, food sovereignty, protection against the introduction of GMOs and toxics in our lands, and also the issue of recognition, the issue of sovereignty and self-determination. We're very strong supporters of the Taino position that they are, especially in Borinquen in Puerto Rico, they are actually colonized against their right of self-determination, annexed to the United States, and not even fully annexed, but held as a territory kind of in this perpetual limbo where the Borinquen people, the Taino peoples, do not have the full right of self-determination. They're not even recognized as indigenous peoples under the laws that the United States has for recognition of rights of indigenous peoples, as limited as those may be.
The common denominator, again, just like last year we discussed invisibility.
Yeah.
You know, most Taino think that we're the only ones that have been told that we're extinct. When that was not the case.
Yeah.
That is a strategy that has been used for many, many years, and to many, many indigenous peoples throughout the world.
Extinction of indigenous peoples, perhaps that's too strong a word, because there was survival. There was some survival, mostly mixture, okay? That's how indigenous populations survived to some degree, by mixing in with other populations. And it begins in the 16th century with the European expansion.
I think the most important thing is that we are affirming our heritage. I might not agree with the next door guy on how he does that, but I think I will defend the right for him to do that, or her. And that's more important to me than the obvious, like, we're not painting a rosy picture or it's all paradise. We were presenting as Taino people and presenting aspects of Taino consciousness at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian.
Yeah, this is a historic event, bringing these people together, academics, enthusiasts, and of course a few members of the community, right? To talk about this in a way that's serious, and to be surrounded by like-minded people in the sense that there's a passion about the subject, about the legacy, and also about telling the story that not only these objects tell themselves the messages, but the story of the people, which is, I think, the most beautiful part of the story, and how these objects interrelate not only with our ancestors, but to who we are as peoples today.
If 80 to 90% were killed off in those first 75 years, that still means that 10 to 20% survived. And that's where I've focused my research, on the 10 to 20% survived. In addition, all the new demography backed up by archaeological excavation shows that there weren't just 200,000 indigenous peoples on the island of Hispaniola when the Europeans arrived. There were more like 4 to 6 million. So if you add that 10 to 20% survived of 4 to 6 million, We're talking a significant amount of people that, yes, whose bloodlines live on through the current day and whose culture had a huge influence on the Dominican culture.
El científico viene obligado a presentar sus datos como son. Los datos son que el 61% de los puertorriqueños tienen un ADN mitocondrial de origen indígena, el 18% de los dominicanos también lo tiene. Hay otros estudios que sugieren que el 33% de los cubanos, una tercera parte, tienen un ADN mitocondrial de origen indígena. Esos son datos científicos. Eso puede ser bueno para alguna gente, puede ser malo para otros, pero eso es la verdad.
La realidad es que el científico debe tener en cuenta los nuevos estudios y debe estar al día con las nuevas investigaciones que se han descubierto. Y también pues tiene que admitir cuando se equivocó o que había hecho un juicio que era a base de la información que tenía disponible en ese momento, y luego cuando hay una nueva información que dice lo contrario, pues uno debe tener la honestidad intelectual de poder decir que uno se equivocó o que uno cambió de idea.
Paper genocide is an interesting concept, you know, but just like it was Naniki who said the way they wrote us out, you know, we're writing ourselves back in. So I think that's a very beautiful saying, you know, and it's absolutely true. You know, I mean, everything that's known about the Taino has been people, you know, telling the same old washed up stories. You know, it just started with De las Casas saying, se acabaron los indios, and that's been used and reused so many times, and people believe it. Once it's on paper, it becomes fact. So we're writing ourselves back in, you know, and we've covered all our bases, you know, whether it's from genetic, linguistic, multidisciplinary, it's happening, you know. We didn't have this before. It was never looked at in this unique way. The good thing is that the Smithsonian has given us this platform, you know, and so that we could explore these things, you know. So I think that we're going to answer all questions, you know, and question all answers.
From whatever perspective, the search for being rooted in the land, for having roots, cultural roots, deeper sense of oneself, a more tranquilo sense of self, of belonging, of connectivity with the natural world, is a major human search right now, because the modern world has tended to erase that. And so it's a natural impetus that people have to reconnect. It's true of Taino, it's true of Caribbean, and we're all for it.
This is a matuco, all right? This is the Yucayeke staff. This is to go from cacique to cacique, okay? All I've done was put Yucayeke guanilla on there and put our color, which is yellow. That's the guanilla color. And all this is just plain meat for the next cacique can add on what he wants to add on, and it goes on from so on and so on and so on, from cacique to cacique. This is the first time we're gonna hand it over to the first cacique, which is Mucaro.
The unification of our people is around that term, Taino, that understanding. When we say that, it's an empowering moment for us, individually, spiritually. And so if we don't agree on a certain subject, or the way that all of the language might be phrased, or all of the concepts, you know, this term is what has brought us together. And I think we have to honor that and respect that, just in the same way that we think we have to honor and respect our ancestors, because that term came to us from our ancestors.
This is the same seashore where your ancestors fished and stepped on for thousands of years. You are there now. And the women were the ones who gave all the symbols of power in Taino tradition.
And that's what's going to help us continue into the future, understanding what the spirituality of that term Taino, all the intricacies that make up that little term. There's a whole universe in there. There's a whole universe in here. There's a whole universe around us, and it's all connected. It's bigger than me. It's not about just me. It's about what's happening. There's hundreds of me's, there's thousands of me's all over the place that are just sprouting up. And I'm not saying that they're carbon copies of me, but I'm saying that there's people who are realizing that how important it is to be allowed to affirm who they are, and that other people don't have the right to tell them who they are. So it's going to continue. So all I can do is just to keep on helping to facilitate dialogues, speaking out when I see or hear something that I know is not justifiable. You know, I'm going to continue to do that until I can't do it anymore.
Nuestro cacique, cacique Múcaro, Barreiro, Agüeybana. His name and his title, properly given to him by the bibis of our nation, as is the tradition of our people. Su nombre y su título, dado a él por las madres, las bibis de nuestra nación, como es la tradición de nuestro pueblo. De esta manera nadie puede dudar ni negar su título. I sing the song of Yokahu. Taino People Batu, Wakia Baba Tureito, Taino People Batu, Wakia Baba Tureito, Taino People Batu, Wakia Baba Tureito.
Our people were traveling and interchanging for thousands of years. And we're here today, in this spot, at this time, in our collective history, to remember.
Of a native, the mind is a sacred place to reside when outside isn't safe. What's a stranger? When you invite him in your space, in your temple, whether TP or Boy or Cacique or chief, shaman or a queen, even when at war. We are peaceful people, but peaceful amidst evil. It's a scene full of B-roll and scripts and C-scroll deceitful. All the sieges and seasons, seize peace treaties and seized agreements, and justice is legal. In the eyes of the colonizer, smile, you are not equal. If you see through illusions, then you know that the source of your soul's the blueprint. Interpret the news clips and put into context the mindset of Master Soyit, the chief of the Wampanoag, who encountered the English and had to decide for the village. Do we keep him alive or do we kill him now? Is this a sign from beyond the clouds? Isn't it ironic how those on the Mayflower do dismay the flowered nations? And we celebrate Thanksgiving. Who would have known Redskins would one day be a fitting? You could catch me on the Bronx River Parkway, rising east like the sun and the stars, man. Etikana Kekoea, that's a God's name. Stampede, fireflies, get your war paint. You can catch me on the Bronx River Parkway, thinking, damn, this is Lenape, land that we sitting on. See through a native's eyes. When you see through native eyes, you see through the lies. In the nation, the tribe is the sanction, the basics where family and friends connect. The structure demands respect, cause it's based on love, not malintent. The names we were born with used to have meaning. They used to predetermine destiny. Now we're stuck with first and last names that don't mean nothing. How you gon' be someone, but you don't know what or where you come from? It's a conundrum. We used to hum and strum drums till our thumbs numb. Now we just strung on drugs with our lungs plunged. Lucky if we not hung or stuffed in a trunk. Son, I'm done running. If it comes to it, I'ma summon tribes to revolt like Tecumseh. No more son, no more Mr. or Master, mixed and remastered. I'm having premonitions. This isn't even classic, this is antique. You can ask the descendants of the Cherokee. There's a forest full of tears when you're forced off your land. Here you need a vision quest to become a man. You can catch me in the Bronx River Parkway, rising east like the sun and the stars, man. Etikana Kekoea, that's a God's name. Stampede, fireflies, get your war paint. You can catch me in the Bronx River Parkway, thinking, damn, this is Lenape, land that we sitting on. See through a native's eyes. When you see through native eyes, you see through the lies. You could change the world with just one kiss. Don't believe me? Wait till you have kids. That's what the elders say. You and I parallel when it's hell we in the same lane. We look up, see the same stars. Do your research, study who you are. See Wounded Knee, see Metacom, see Crazy Horse sitting bull and Cochise. See fallen timbers, Greensville Treaty. Speaking peace with the enemy ain't easy. You can catch me in the Bronx River Parkway, rising east like the sun and the stars, man. Intikana Kikawea, that's the God's name. Stampede 5 flies, get your war paint. You can catch me in the Bronx River Parkway, thinking, damn, this is Lenape, land that we sitting on. See through a native's eyes. When you see through native eyes, you see through the lies.